Welcome today and very excited to talk to you. My name is Phil Wilkins and I am the host of the BYA Podcast. And today we have a very special guest, Miss Tarji Carter, who is the founder and CEO of the Franchise Player and co-founder of the Franchise Game. Tarji, welcome to the show.
Hey, Phil. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here. I tell you what, I'm really excited to get into this today. Franchising has been such a huge part of my life. And I think the work that you are doing, with under the Franchise Player and the Franchise Game for marginalized and underrepresented communities is just outstanding. And I'm so excited and can't wait to get into it with you today. And so I applaud you for what you're doing. And it's just an honor that you're here.
Thank you. It's really important work. I really believe that what we do at the Franchise Player and through the Franchise Game is the work of, someone who has been in the community, who has felt the brunt of not being a part of the conversation. And it's the work that I've been pretty much purposed to do. So I'm excited to be on your podcast today and to talk about how we got here and even some of the plans that we have for next year.
No, it's so good because I really felt like my journey in franchising was, I think in many ways, divine driven. I mean, as a young man, I was just reading an article in the magazine and in the basement, and the magazine that I had received was Money Magazine. And, representation matters. There happened to be an African-American gentleman on the front cover. He had a big arch and a big cheesy grin on his face, and French fries were raining on his head. And as I read that article, I felt like a lightning bolt go down my back. No joke. I was like, oh, wow, this is it, And I just really felt like there was some type of divine intervention or connection for me. And that just kind of started my journey of trying to connect to people who were in the system. And I just think like so many folks are in situations today where they would like to take greater control of their future and they don't know where to turn. And so I think, the work that you're doing is just outstanding. And so I'd love to hear a little bit more about it. And I also want to hear about your journey, how you got started and where you're from and some of the obstacles that you've had to overcome. And let's just go.
Man, where do we start? So I'm originally from Boston, Massachusetts, Roxbury to be exact, where New Edition and Bobby Brown are from. So that should tell you a lot right there. And
Robbie, Bobby.
Ronnie, Bobby, Ricky, Mike, Ralph, and Johnny. That's where I come from. Although Johnny's not from there. But okay. I come from that part of town and probably was one of the roughest neighborhoods in Boston. And changed a lot since, but that's where I got my start, my grit, going to school every day. And, I lived on a dead end street that was a dirt road. It was probably the last dirt road and dead end street to be paved in the city. And so I grew up in a pretty rough neighborhood and started my career in hotel and hospitality and then moved into franchising after a brief stint working as the executive assistant to Tyler Perry. Yes. And I always say, if I can work for him, I can do anything in life.
I bet.
No, he's a great guy. But, we talked about being a perfectionist earlier. He is that exactly what he is. And so I learned a lot working from him, but then pivoted back to hotel sales. And that's when I met the then president of Cinnabon Corporation, Jeff Hill. And so started working as a franchise manager for Carvel. Then within 8 months was promoted to director of franchise sales for Cinnabon and Carvel for the whole country. And that's really when I started to learn everything that I know up to this point about franchising and the benefits of it. And so I really just kind of fell into it. It found me. I didn't find it. And it's been a long, almost 2 decades long journey for me since really learning about franchising and understanding the impact it can have on the financial freedom for everyone.
Yes. Oh, there's no doubt. It was a great blessing and an honor for me to have, been in franchising for over 20 years. And it's an incredible opportunity. And I can't wait to hear more about it. When you started this business, the Franchise Player and the Franchise Game, how did all that come about? Talk us through that. Yeah. And we were kind of joking earlier because when I first saw the Franchise Game, I was thinking like, is it a board game or what? Like what are you doing? But now I
Yeah.
understand. But I'd love for you to explain a little bit for our listeners.
So it started with many years ago. I would go to conferences all the time, and I would notice that there wasn't much diversity no matter which conference I went to. And
Yeah.
I always felt like a fish out of water. And I started having these visions of, one day I want to create something where people that look like me can come and feel welcome and feel like they belong. And so for years, I've been writing notes down on the back of napkins and, envelopes, and just really keeping notes of, if I were to do this one day, what I wanted it to look like. And so I was working with Yum and had the conversation about this vision. And my contact there simply said, well, why don't you have it here? I had been keeping notes for almost 10 years, or maybe even more than 10 years. I had the vision. I knew who I wanted to participate. I knew what the topics should be. And so when she said that, we ended up having 3 months to plan and execute the event. So we had this conversation June 6th of 2023, and we executed on September the 15th, 2023.
That
And
is
so that
amazing.
was the start of the franchise game. The franchise player started a little bit earlier and from the same premise, wanted to be able to provide education opportunities and resources to underserved, underrepresented, marginalized communities, including the Black community, about the benefits of franchise ownership and how to get into it with your eyes wide open, while also providing resources, right? Resources that can help from every aspect and within every discipline of franchising. And so that's what the franchise player does. We help individuals understand what franchising is and isn't. We also help to determine what would be the best route to take, right? What industry is a better fit versus another? And then we help them on the path to receiving approval from their brand of choice. And at the same time, we offer the brands the opportunity to work with us, and we tell them that we will not hand them a cold lead. So anyone that we refer to a brand that we work with has gone through a thorough vetting process. They have secured access to capital. We are with them every step of the way. We help them with their business plan. We attend Discovery Day. So all the things that I know our communities need in order to be successful. And so because I don't work for one brand specifically, I have the freedom and the autonomy to take as much time as I need with each client to ensure that they're getting the guidance and the support that they need. So we're working both sides of the equation, making sure that the candidate has what they need in order to feel confident moving into this new business opportunity, and that the brand is receiving qualified and quality candidates to add to their franchisee system.
Well, that's a lot of value that you're adding to both sides of the equation. I think of it as like this 360-degree impact that you're having, where you're impacting the potential franchisee as well as the franchisor, and you're kind of bringing it all together, which is really really cool. Let me ask you this: do you represent just food brands in franchising, or is it more than just food brands today?
No, we work within all franchise industries, and
Okay.
any brands that want to work with us that understand what we do and why we do it and are nurturing of inclusion. We want to work with brands like that. So we work with food service concepts, but we also represent pet services companies. We
Cool.
work with home improvement companies. And so, any industry that is a good fit for the client, we're going to help them down that path to find the best brand that fits their financial wherewithal, their passion, their experience, their skills. And then ultimately, like I said earlier, we want to help shorten that sales cycle for the brand.
Yeah. I think that's so important because so many people, you think about franchising and it's like, I don't want to own a food concept. Well, you know what? There's a lot of other concepts out there that aren't necessarily, that aren't food related. And then the fact that, you're helping these franchisors who may not have the resources or access to the underserved communities, but definitely want to diversify and see the opportunity in diversifying their business and their franchising community. So I applaud, what you're doing. I
Thank
just think
you.
it's smart, really,
That's
really
a
smart.
great point. I mean, there are so many brands out there that know, we maybe haven't done a great job of being more inclusive, right? And maybe that's not by design. And we'll have the tough conversation like, listen, this is where we're starting from. We want to get better. We want to do better, but we just don't have the bandwidth to build a program. Or so the franchise player is really like an extension of your sales team, right? It can
Yes.
be outsourced inclusion department, right? However you
Correct.
want to word it, right? But it's a
Correct.
way that you can have access to candidates that you wouldn't normally have access to, as well as events. So sometimes we'll curate our own events like the franchise game and the scrimmage, but sometimes we'll be invited to events like we partnered with the Texas Black Expo in Houston
Yes.
earlier this year.
Yes.
And so we did a scrimmage at their event. And so that's not an event that most franchise brands would even think about going to simply because the relationships aren't there. So we add a layer of credibility in some senses, but we also help to lessen the load in terms of having to figure out how to have a conversation with diverse communities where it feels authentic.
Yes. Yes. No, the work that you're doing down there in Dallas, and I'm very aware of that initiative down there with the franchising initiative that the mayor's office has kicked off, and that's led, I believe, by Carlos White. Carlos is a great guy and doing fantastic work down there. In regards to hotbeds for franchising, do you see like certain pockets around the country that are, this is a great market for franchises and franchisors?
Oh yeah. So of course Atlanta is always a hot market for franchising. I'm working with quite a few brands right now that are looking to expand outside of their core markets into Atlanta. And I mean, if a brand can succeed here,
Whew.
hats off to them, right? They can probably
Yeah.
succeed anywhere. But Dallas is also a hotbed for franchising. Detroit is starting to see a lot of momentum. And then also, I would say Orlando. It's a market that's really, you get to capture a lot of the Disney folks that are visiting. And
Yeah.
so you'll get to experience franchises from a traditional perspective. And then there might even be some inside of the hotel from a non-traditional perspective. So there's opportunity there as well. And then of course out west, if you can make it out in California,
Do we really
there's a
need to
lot.
go there?
Yeah, there's a lot going on out there.
There's a
But I mean,
lot going on, right?
if you can make it work out there, I mean, I think that says a lot. And I know some of the brands that I've worked with and worked for have had some great success out there. It takes some work in being able to
Sure.
comply, right? But if you have the right team and if it's that important, then you'll figure out a way to make it work.
It was amazing to me. Like I had the good fortune of owning restaurants in a variety of different areas, like in Ohio, Kentucky, Florida, and all around. And just how certain markets were stronger than the others. Like, oh, this is a good burger eating market. Like the folks in Kentucky, they liked burgers. Like they were into that. And then you move down south and here into the Atlanta area in particular, and the profile changes. It's heavy chicken and those kinds of things. So as a prospective franchisee, it is something to be aware of. Like what are the taste profiles? What are the business requirements? We talked about California. What are some other things that as a prospective franchisee walking in and thinking to myself, man, I want to own a franchise. What are some things that you would recommend that they strongly consider?
I would strongly consider if you're really hot about a brand, get a part-time job there.
Yep.
Work there and you can learn so much from a customer perspective, an employee perspective, and then even the brand from a corporate perspective. You just get to learn so much. And then, it's the cheaper way of figuring it out before you sign a franchise agreement and learn 6 months in, a year in that, I this probably wasn't the best decision that I made.
Right.
So I think, if you can get a part-time job working there in the evenings, on the weekends, that gives you a great opportunity to get some inside information that you might not necessarily receive otherwise.
No, you know what? I like that. I know, certain brands have different training programs and different lengths of programs, that they go through. I'd like to say that I was on the remedial program because mine lasted like 3 years. But you know what? That I needed that time, and then I think the other thing to that was when how do you work with the prospective franchisees in regards to the income that you're used to making in your corporate role may not be there as a new owner. I mean, I know in my own situation, I took a 70% cut in pay. My first couple of years, I went from 125,000 a year down to 40.
Mm.
That was hard. That was really, really hard. And I remember calling my CPA and saying, what the hell did I do? So how do you coach them up on that? Because it just might not be there, and you have tax requirements and everything else. And, it's hard. It is a grind.
It is
It's
hard.
definitely tough.
It's a life-changing opportunity and you have to prepare for it, right? So
Yeah.
that's why it's important to, like I said, find a part-time job within that organization. Also talk to existing franchisees and get some really solid information. Understand, what it's going to take to build out one unit. How much did they spend on travel expenses? How were they able to pay their bills when they were in training and not receiving an income? All of those things. So again, I have the flexibility to work with candidates to prepare them and to have those conversations before they decide to quit their job. So I actually had a conversation today. I met with a husband and wife couple. We went to look at a coffee concept that I work with, and we had that conversation. So they decided that he's probably going to leave his job and she's going to continue to work, at least for the first couple of years.
Yep.
They're going to talk to their friends. They have in-laws, they have their own parents, to see if maybe they could do something on a larger scale as a family because there's strength in numbers. And then there's power, right? If your family knows that you've done the research and you're really committed, so committed that you're willing to leave your job, you'll get more help that way. Not everybody has the luxury of having that sort of support system, but if you do, it's definitely worth having those conversations on the front end versus getting yourself into something and trying to figure out how you're going to sustain, your daily financial responsibilities while still trying to build a brand.
That those are great points, because I know in our situation, my wife worked the first 2 or 3 years, while we were able to get that business off the ground, and just the cushion of that and the flexibility of that, is so, so important. And, oftentimes coming from underrepresented groups or marginalized groups, we may not have the benefit of having parental generational wealth passed down to us, so it's like you could look at my P&L and you could say, man, he's doing really well, but at the same time, I was having to draw on that P&L to eat, right? And so if you have that diversification and that income, that side income coming in, you can take a lot of pressure off that business and a lot of pressure off the household by doing that. So I always encourage folks to, like, hey, if you have a significant other, partner, spouse, whatever, keep them working for a couple of years till for
Yeah,
sure,
no, for sure. I was with another couple. We were looking at a different brand and we had the opportunity to sit down with the franchisee, which was really cool. They just happened to be in the shop that day. And so we're having the conversation and he's telling them that he paid for everything in the shop because he had a trust. And he owns everything in the shop. It all belongs to him. And then after he was kind enough to share information, we kind of went out and kind of talked in the parking lot, and we just all kind of looked at each other like, wouldn't that be nice, right? Like,
right, right.
unfortunately in our community there's not a lot of, not a lot of that, or there hasn't been. I know that as a community we're learning more about developing trust and really being a lot more fiscally responsible from an investment standpoint. So I love that we're progressing in that way. But as it stands right now, not a lot of us are trust fund babies, right? We
Right.
are having to figure out how to make this all work. And another part of the conversation that I had with a couple I was with today is this is where you need to be from a liquid standpoint, whether you do one store or multiple, start saving. And so they mentioned that they sometimes do DoorDash or whatever it is. And I said, whatever income that is,
Pop it
have that
away.
go straight into your savings account. That way there, when it comes time to show proof of assets, the brand and the bank, right, will see that you have a consistent habit of saving.
Yeah.
And they want to see that. They don't want to see that, oh, you borrowed $100,000 from mommy and now it's sitting in
Right.
your bank account. They want to see that you're responsible. And so, we just have to have tough conversations. I have to have a lot of tough conversations. I understand most people want to own a Chick-fil-A, they want to own a McDonald's, but there's some nuances to both, right? And so those conversations, can get a little heated sometimes
Yeah.
because there are certain aspects of those business models that might not be most favorable to some of the clients that I deal with, right?
Yeah.
They may be
Yep.
thinking one thing and we have to have a conversation about what the reality truly is. And both brands are great brands,
Right.
but they may or may not be a good fit for a person based on their background, their experience, and their financials.
Yeah. No, I'm sitting here kind of giggling and for a variety of reasons. One, what you just described my personal story. At 26, I applied, got rejected, and I think the difference was where a lot of people would give up. I called the licensing manager and was like, I think you made a mistake. And he was like, you didn't have any money, man. But I was like, well, can I stay in touch with you? And I wrote him a letter literally every month for 3 years. Okay.
3 years?
3 years. Three
My
years. I
gosh.
promise you, 3 years.
You're
And then I started
persistent.
the training program that lasted 3 years while working my full-time job. But the ability to, and it did something for me, which I tell people all the time. I got very good at projecting my cash flow in my own household. And if you cannot project cash flow in your own household, you're never going to be able to project cash flow in your business, right?
Absolutely.
So that really helped me, and then I think it demonstrated to them that I was serious. I had to be, like to do what we were able to do. And it really, in many ways, I think empowered me because in that 6 year period, we were making good money. We were living well within our means, but we went from 10,000 to $250,000 saved, and we were able to buy the restaurant conventionally and everything else. So, that was just a very empowering experience for me, life-changing experience on so many different levels. And I think even if they don't get selected for a particular brand that they may want, if they execute what you're talking about in regards to, saving, living within your means, putting money away, investing it, being great stewards, it can still be life-changing for them.
Absolutely. And again, we can't forget bringing in your circle of influence, right? I'm sure, we all know one or two people that are responsible with their finances, they're dependable, they're reliable, and having conversations about how can we pool our resources, our financial resources, and our human capital so that we can maybe start with one, right? So we're not all
Right.
taking on the risk. And so that we're not taking on the risk on our own and that we're
Yeah.
sharing, spreading the risk around. And then once we have that one, we can make the decision on how we want to grow, whether it's together or apart, but learning every aspect of the business, right? Everybody gets cross trained. And I think there's not enough of that happening, which is part of the conversations that we have on a daily basis, is that we can't be afraid to partner.
It's a great, it's a hot button here,
I'm
but
sure.
no, and it's wonderful though, because I think, there are certain communities, the Asian Indian community, for example, that does a great job of that,
Yeah.
that gets into the hotel space and really, has dominated in that industry. And yet, there's certain industries where we just need to do a better job of that, right? And certain communities where we need to do a better job of that. And I saw that, in other brands, and the brands it sounds like that you're working with allows that partnering type of opportunity. And it definitely spreads out your risk, right? And that's an important consideration. And so how do you help them with structuring that? Do you help them with structuring those kind of partnerships and
Oh,
kind of
yes.
talking through those partnerships as well?
Yeah, sometimes it's a matter of, Tarji, I just don't have anybody that is willing to go into a partnership with me. And, I would really like to have someone on my team and I just don't really know where to start. So that's always a tough conversation because now we're having to help from scratch, right? There's
Hmm.
no children involved, no parents, no siblings. So that's a little bit more difficult. So what we do have is the ability to bring together operating partners with potential investors, right? So
Sure.
we work with hundreds of different potential operating partners who are looking to advance in their career at their current brand and maybe have just been overlooked for advancement, for ownership opportunities, for growth, and they just feel a little stagnant in their current role. So they're looking for a way to utilize all of their experience in a way where they feel like they have something to truly call their own and to be a part of. So we do a lot of that individually on a daily basis. Also at the events, the franchise game and the scrimmage, where we invite investors, we invite operators, and they're having conversations, they're meeting one another, they're talking about deals. So when I know of that, I reach out to, when a deal crosses my desk. For example, there was a deal that crossed my desk a couple weeks ago. It was a pretty large deal here in Atlanta. And I thought, oh my gosh, if I could put this person with that person, let me reach out and see if they're open to having a conversation. So there was a lot of that happened a couple weeks ago. And so now we're able to put folks in touch who have similar interests and are looking to grow in the same way. And so making that initial connection, they have a conversation about this deal and then maybe other deals to come. And so in my own little way, I just feel like, that's helping a little
Oh,
bit
yeah.
and really opening up the opportunity for folks who may not have had this opportunity had they not met one another. And so
Hmm.
I know when I was with other brands, I had mentioned this before, we need to bring operators together with investors and no one would touch it with a 10-foot pole. But now that it's happening, it's really catching on. Like I got a text message the other day from an old colleague, and they said, I really, and I'm going to paraphrase because I don't have it in front of me, but basically saying that they're proud of me for what I was able to build from nothing.
Hmm.
And I met this person at the start of my franchising career and never knew they were paying attention. But now, they see kind of the things I've been talking about. I guess I was the crazy person back then, like that'll never work. And so I believed enough in it. And I think there's, this person and others are starting to see that, okay, maybe there was she was on to something before we were, and so it's
Sure.
starting to happen now. And I appreciate the text message and the acknowledgement. And it's really not even about that for me. This is so much bigger. Like I really feel like this is divine work that I'm doing. I was blessed and fortunate enough to be in the rooms to learn all of this. And how selfish would it be of me to keep all of that to myself?
Right. Right.
I want to make sure that this information gets in the right hands and is used for the right purposes, which is really to move communities forward who may not have had access to this information before.
No, I just think it's so valuable, and we're talking about getting in the door. And I know some of these marginalized communities, and I always used to, say to folks, hey, look, don't just judge a book by its cover. Like don't just say, oh, here's an inner city opportunity and we just want you there, or whatever else, or we want you in the country, and all of these things. Like let's take some time to get to know the franchisee, versus just saying, hey, this is what I need, this is where I want to
Yes.
put you,
Yes.
because this solves one of my problems as the brand, right? I
Yep.
I I, I never was. I recall going to one restaurant one day, and I had my wife with me. We pulled up on the parking lot. Someone immediately walked to our door. We walked inside. There was a group of guys looking at us, kind of crazy.
Hmm.
And she just said, "No, absolutely not. This is not what we talked about this, and we're not doing this."
Yeah.
And I think it's so important that as a couple or as a franchisee, that you definitely have your buy box, right? Like I knew my buy box. It was not, a certain criteria. I just knew. I'm
Yeah.
like, no, I'm not. And there were just a variety of reasons for me not to be there, not to go in there. But I had to have that, and I think that's so important. Do you talk to your prospective clients about that?
Yeah, I have those conversations, and that's why it's important to have a consultant, a professional on your team. Don't be bullied, right? Don't be
Right.
bullied into an opportunity because you're emotional about wanting to own something.
Yes.
And, I think it really takes you being willing to walk away from a deal to find what's truly for you.
Mm-hmm.
So, and also something that seems too good to be true more than likely is. And so that's why it's very important to conduct due diligence, to know what your buy box is, right? And then to also be able to bounce this off of folks who are in positions that you aspire to be in, right? Which is why
Yes.
we have a lot of franchisees that come to our events, that speak on our panels, because to your point earlier, representation matters. And so if someone's presented with an opportunity and maybe I'm not too sure about it, I can reach out to one of my franchise attorneys. We can reach out to some existing franchisees that are maybe with the brand or a competing brand, or, if it's a non-traditional opportunity in an airport or university campus, we have folks that are in position right now that can speak to these opportunities and say, hey, here's my perspective on it. This is what worked for me. Can't tell you what to do or what not to do, but this is what I did, right? So
Yeah.
there's the opportunity to have real life conversations in real time with folks who are already walking in some of these opportunities as we speak. So I just think, having someone who's on your team who can recognize when something just doesn't quite look right can really help to save a lot of aggravation and litigation down the line.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a great point. I mean, obviously, the franchise agreement is written in the franchisor's favor. I mean, like 100%. It
And if
is,
I were the franchisor, I would have it written exactly that way
yeah,
and expect that whoever's coming into the system has done their due diligence and enlisted the help of a professional to help them work through that language. Like, that's the business part of it, right? Like, this
right.
is what it is. It's in black and white. This is what it is. And if you want to be a part of it, these are the rules, right? This is the
Yeah,
box
yeah,
that you're in.
yeah. No, absolutely. And I think that's another consideration for the franchisee. Where are you comfortable, following these rules and these frameworks, and the hours of operations, they're not going to change, the
Mhm.
standards are not going to change.
Right.
And are you cool with that, because they're not going to play, they're not going to play with their brand standards. That's not up for negotiation or debate. It's just kind of like, this is
Yeah.
the proven system, this is what works, and then execute that system to its fullest to maximize the opportunity, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And so that's part of the tough conversation in the beginning. This is what franchising is and isn't. Maybe this is for you, maybe it's not. So if you're a true entrepreneur and you want to do things your way in your timing, then maybe franchise ownership may not be for you, right? So let's talk about it a little bit deeper and let me provide you with some examples of things that may or may not float with you, right? So you
Right.
may not be interested in buying into a system that doesn't allow for regionality, right? So if
Hmm.
you own a baked cinnamon roll shop up in Ohio and they say, well, the brand says, well, you have to sell churros. I don't know how many people in Ohio eat churros, but if that's not a popular regional item and you're mandated to put it on your menu, that might be something that a true entrepreneur just isn't willing to do, right? So we use
Correct.
examples like that, like this is something you might be able to have a little flexibility with, and this is something that you won't. And so you have to really know that what you're getting into is you're buying into the benefits of mistakes that have been made. You're also buying into the support system, the processes and the procedures that are in place. So when you send an email, there's somebody on the receiving end of that that's there to support you. When you make a
Correct.
phone call, right? So you're buying into all of that versus starting your own independent concept where you're wearing all the hats, you're asking the questions and having to answer them yourself. So just deciding whether or not you want to go the franchising route or the independent route, that's a big decision that someone has to make. And that leans into the franchise agreement. Can you live with this language and remain in compliance or not? Because there are consequences if you're not. So
Absolutely.
we go through all of that.
Yeah, and those consequences could be costly. Oh, you brought up an interesting point where the support is there. You have very mature brands, that have been around for a long time, that offer a tremendous amount of support, be it human resource support, legal support, franchising support, generating P&Ls, all those kinds of things, comparisons, whatever. And then you might get into a newer brand or a new opportunity where that may or may not be available and that support may not be there. And then if you were on the side of the offense where you're actually buying a franchise, what would be some of the red flags for you? I mean, or not to put you on the spot or anything. Well, I will tell
No.
you, for me,
Uh-huh.
what I found and what I find is that a system that has a certain, under a certain threshold of units, it's
Mhm.
very hard if you wanted to finance a deal because they just don't have enough traction yet. The banks, are a little hesitant about that. So that was one thing. But what kind of systems could a potential franchisee expect, if you will, if they're going into a franchise system?
Yeah, I would say one of the red flags for me is if you're working with a brand and they're leading you to specific franchisees for validation,
Yes.
right? Like, oh, if we really only want you to talk to these
Right.
three folks, right? That's a red flag. Of course, it's also illegal to do that. I've heard of it being done before.
Yeah.
Um, and so that would be a red flag for me. And then also if the brand is rushing you to make a decision, right? If you sign this agreement, if you can commit to within X days, like pleading with you, it's a little bit of a red flag to me because if you truly have an offering that is of value, we should be able to take our time to conduct the proper due diligence without feeling rushed. So I would
Hmm.
just say make sure you're talking to franchisees who are in with the brand and are able to speak to the level of support that they receive, the process to get to where they are, and most importantly, ask them like, if you could do this all over again, would you? I think
Yeah.
that's probably one of the best questions you can ask anyone, and depending on their answer, the follow-up is why and why not. And so I would just say, those are some key takeaways. If anyone takes anything away from this conversation, if they're looking to become a franchisee, that's probably some of the best advice I've given since we've been chatting.
No, I think you've given nothing but great advice since we've been chatting. And so no, it's awesome. I think the other thing for me that where I kind of become very cautious, I think, is really in regards to the real estate situation.
Hmm.
Like, hey, you've got the franchisor, and then you also have the landlord if they are in a strip center,
Hmm.
right? And so you've got a couple different agreements to negotiate and work through and to be mindful of. Not a problem, but just be aware of it as you're getting into it.
No, for sure. Real estate is one of the most important decisions that you'll make. And oftentimes you'll see brands that end up in horrible positions within a strip center because maybe they got a good deal or they got a good deal on the rent structure. And the good deal typically means, there's low visibility,
Hard
may
to
not
get
may
in
or
and out of.
hard to get in and out of, signage is an issue, lighting, co-tenancy, right? There might not be the right co-tenancy there where, there's synergy amongst the concepts or brands. So there's a lot that you have to be cognizant of. And to the person just getting into franchising, that might not be something that they'd even heard of before. So that's why I always recommend enlisting the help of a professional. So the brand is
Yes.
going to be there to offer guidance. Most brands won't negotiate a lease for you, but there is an approval process that you have to go through with most brands. But having a professional real estate broker on your side, on your team, which we have access to and have relationships with here at the Franchise Player, it's going to be so important because that first deal is going to teach you so much, and then
Woo!
yeah, and you take those learnings into the second and third and so on and so forth. But
Yeah.
that first one, you're really going to need some hand holding with that if that's not, if you're not well versed in managing real estate or sourcing real estate and negotiating leases, and sometimes you just don't know which questions to ask. So,
Right.
I think the real estate piece is so important. It's one of your fixed costs that you're more than likely not ever going to be able to negotiate once you sign your lease. So you definitely need to go into it knowing that this is one of the biggest decisions you'll make as it relates to your business.
No, it's that first store is a real educator.
Yeah.
A real educator. But I mean, it's like little things, even like the traffic pattern. and how does the traffic pattern change throughout the day? And, in a city like Atlanta where it's traffic hell just to get home,
Hmm.
people may not travel as far to go back to where they went to lunch because they're just over the traffic, and it might hit later. You would think, oh man, dinner's going to be at 5 o'clock. No, it's actually going to be at 7:30 because everybody's just getting home and they're recovering. They're like, hell, I need a
Especially in
drink before I
Atlanta.
go back out. Like I can't just handle it. So
Yeah, you
it,
want to
it
be convenient. You want to be in the way and on the way. You want to
yeah,
be, you want to be on the right side of the road. That's really important.
yeah,
So I worked
yeah,
for this one brand and they do 40% of their business before 11 a.m.
yeah.
So they have to be on that AM side of the road, the
Side,
morning side of the road. And, someone who's new to the industry may not know that. And they get a
right.
great deal on the PM side of the road for breakfast business. And I would imagine the brand wouldn't allow that. But just like using it as an example, that could be a very costly mistake.
Yeah, no, you don't think about those things. The side of the road, how much percentage is drive through? Do you have the access to the window?
Yeah.
I, it's just huge.
It
But
can make or break your business.
oh, for real, you could just make or break your life.
That too.
No, you know what? It it was really for me a labor of love. I mean, even though I was in it, I never really felt like I was working so much. And I think that's when you made the right decision where it's like, hey, I'm here. Now there are days I won't lie that it got long or so, sometimes like the people situation for me, it was the people situation where it's like, okay, 400 employees is a lot. Um, but I never felt like I hate this, like
Mm.
I just, and so I could not even imagine being in a situation like that where it's like, I hate it, I don't want to go to work today. So I think it's very important to do the due diligence up front so that you can truly love and what you do and embrace your brand. And I just think the work that you're doing and helping people through that process is so powerful.
Thank
It's so
you.
powerful. I mean that. And I,
Thank you. I
I think you're
appreciate
having
that.
a great impact on families and on legacies that they can provide. And, some of the best years of my life. I never will forget as when my oldest was just like 3 years old.
Mhm.
Our job every night was to go up and sit on daddy's lap and look at our sales for the day.
I
And
love
and
that.
yeah, and I mean and we would just go out and look at drive-throughs or whatever else, and it's such an educational experience for the kids too, because now he can look at a location and he even says it half the time when we're driving around. I don't like that spot. I'm like, why don't you like that spot? Oh, it's too hard to get in and out of it. Blah 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 blah. And I'm like,
I love that.
Jordan, why don't you just go into the real estate game? Like you've got this. So I just think it's more than just a vehicle to make money.
Mhm.
It's much more than that. And I just applaud you for what you all are doing.
Thank you. We appreciate that. To your point, it's so much bigger than just one person. It's really about uplifting a community, giving hope, and not just hope without instruction, right? Or hope without resources, but bringing in examples and having representation to say, listen, this person's doing it. This group owns 25
Yeah.
Ben and Jerry's and 3 Starbucks, and this group owns the Dunkin' Donuts inside the Pentagon. And being able to have those conversations and have real life examples and referrals and references, like it really makes a difference. And then the mentoring opportunities, the job creation in the communities that we serve, it's just it's such a snowball effect, right? And and what I would really like to just have some impact on is the the recruitment process, right? I
Hmm.
think if we could get to a point where it's a matter of let's find the right person or group for this opportunity, full stop,
Yep.
right? And if they're close to being the right person, how do we get them across the finish line versus oh, they're $10,000 short, or, oh,
Right.
how do you then take the time and have some empathy and have vision to say, okay, this group checks a lot of boxes. How do we stay in touch with them? How do we help them get to where we need them to be considered as a viable candidate for this brand? Right.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
sometimes those conversations are not had. It's like, oh, well, this person doesn't meet it. Let's send them a rejection letter and let's move on to the next candidate. And I think a
Correct.
lot of times people think, or brands think, that there's this perfect franchisee, and that just doesn't exist.
No.
Even the strongest franchisees with hundreds of units, everyone has flaws, right? Everyone has room for improvement. And I think if we just offer a little bit of grace that, this group may or may not be where we need them to be right now. If they're not, how do we help get them there? And if they are, how do we make sure that we're supporting them to be as successful as we know they can be?
You know what? You just jogged my memory, and I'll give you the perfect example in my own personal life that would fill exactly what you're talking about. I ran my first store for 3 years, and I had a regional VP by the name of Doug Gore, and I absolutely loved Doug. I would,
Shout out
if
to
I,
Doug.
huh?
Shout out to Doug.
Oh, for sure. Shout out to Doug. So Doug saw potential. He made a move happen for me from Cincinnati to Lexington, Kentucky. There was no representation in Lexington. Lexington was a very strong market, the highest, regional volume market in our region, average unit volume. And so I moved there. I did a basically like a like kind exchange. I bought my second restaurant, the equity that I had in my first one, no money down. We built it brand new. And then same thing with the third. And then when I was looking to grow, from my third to my fourth, he called me and he was like, "Hey, I've got someone that I would like you to talk to, and he's a strong business consultant for us, and we think you would probably need that person to go from three to four." And so they negotiated a deal with an owner operator down there, and they then leased me the fourth restaurant for like 24 months so that I was able to save up enough money to do the downstroke on the fourth. And so to your point, there is creativity, there's flexibility out there. And, sometimes if we don't have that representation at the door, in the room, at the table, and someone who is advocating for us, those opportunities may not be presented to us. But thank God for Doug Gore, because he had the business acumen, and he was like, "I see the potential in you, and I'm willing to take this chance and make this thing happen." And he did, and we operated down there for 10 plus years and really
Wow.
knocked it out. And so I was really grateful for him, and the grace, and I think the business acumen that he had to be able to pull that off and make that happen.
Yeah, and the vision, right? He saw you
Yep.
for who you were, your work ethic. He saw an opportunity that made a great fit and wanted to be
Yep.
a part of making that happen. So, more of that is what we need. And I think the more we can get some of the politics out of the way, and really hone in on how we can help one another all rise. Yeah, it will be so much better together when we're able to really focus on the bigger picture, and really it opens up so many more opportunities for growth, right? Partnership, through support, and then even from a lending perspective, right?
Oh yeah.
The banks want to know that you have a cohesive unit, right? You're not just
Yes.
partnering someone that you just met yesterday, right? They
Right.
want to know that there's some history there, that there's true relationships. So I think we've come a long way, but I think there's still a lot of work that we can do, and there's still a lot of opportunity for growth.
So Tarji, as we wrap up real quick, how do people get in touch with you? Because I would imagine after this podcast, and I know you're going to share it, I'm going to share it. There's going to be some folks that will, I hope, reach out to you, and I want to make sure that they can get in touch with you.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I'm everywhere.
Yes,
I'm
you are.
on Instagram. I'm on Instagram. I have two pages. I have my personal page, which is I am Tarji. I am TARJI, and then I am the franchise player. So those are the two handles on Instagram. And then I'm also on LinkedIn as Tarji Carter. And we also have a page for the franchise player on LinkedIn as well. And then our website is thefranchiseplayer.com. So we're pretty easy to find.
Awesome. Awesome. You know what? You stoked a fire in me in regards to franchising, and I'm sure everybody that watches this will also feel it. And I'm really proud of you. I really am, and
Thank
I'm happy
you.
for you. And I know this is going to be uh, it's going to have such a tremendous impact for the people that you touch through this program. And I think even the brands that work with you, they're very fortunate to have you on their team.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. It's hard work. It's heavy work at times, but it's so needed. And I think it's very much appreciated by those who have had the opportunity to work with me and us, my partner, Desi Brown Jr., Dalen Goff, through the franchise game and the scrimmages. We're really just out here trying to do good work and help people to reach their fullest potential. And if I can pull you out of retirement,
Mm.
that would be a nice feather in my cap.
You know what? You got me a little bit more interested, you know.
I'll take
Nah.
that.
Yeah, no,
Progress
it
is
is
progress.
it is awesome, you know, and I will say if I can ever help you or your franchisees, I'd love to do so. I have that passion
Absolutely.
for that drive-through still, so that's awesome. Tarji, thank you so much. It's just been a
Thank
pleasure.
you.
Yeah,
Thank you
it's
for
been
having
great.
me.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.